Number 1. My Lyft driver. I already told this story on another subreddit, but wanted to share it with more details because it got a lot more attention than I thought it would. For reference, I'm 19M, FTM, and on my Lyft app, I just put my preferred name and gender because I could, as well as a nice selfie of me. So in the system, I'm a guy. When I first moved in the city that I live in for college, I didn't have a car and would ride my bike or walk everywhere depending on the distance. My work was a little under a mile away, and my school was about 2. So a 30-minute bike ride to school and 20-minute walk to work. I liked those walks, they helped me clear my head. But as these months got hotter, it became more unbearable to walk for even those short 20 minutes, especially when I had to go to work and I would be all sweaty. I started using Lyft religiously once I discovered the wait and save option. Most of the time, it wouldn't even make me wait that long. Sometimes it was even shorter than the more expensive options. I was pulling out easily 10 plus Lyfts a week between getting to work and everywhere else. Since I'm not paying bills living with my dad, I had a pretty decent amount of expendable income and was able to manage my budget to still have money left over after all those trips, in case you were wondering. A couple months ago, I had ordered my wait and save Lyft and left to wait outside a couple minutes early. I'm looking at my phone, taking note of my driver's car and my driver's appearance. I walk out of our driveway and see a very similar looking car to the little icon that Lyft gives you, a small white sedan for both the icon and this car. And unless you tried looking for the little details, they look the same. But luckily, I do. And I noticed that this wasn't my driver. Plus, it said my real one was 2 minutes to me. I just assumed he was waiting on someone else, maybe a friend of a neighbor, or maybe he's looking for directions. Every possible logical explanation for why he's sitting in my driveway staring at me runs through my mind. I feel awkward, so I take the mail out, then go back around the back door and set it in our kitchen. Go back out. He's still there, we make eye contact, and he rolls down his window. Maybe he's just lost? Let me see if I can help. The driver of this car was a Middle Eastern man in his mid-30s, I want to say. I didn't think to get a physical description because I didn't think I needed to. He pulls out his phone, and it very clearly shows my profile that says that he's my driver. I look down at my phone again. My actual driver is a black man in his 40s. I guess through a tinted window, which he had, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but since he rolled down his window, I was able to. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason, I just trusted him. I've been living as a guy for almost 2 years now and passed pretty well. Creepy men had been taken out of my radar the way women have to keep them in. I haven't been catcalled, assaulted, harassed, and just assumed that I was immune to kidnapping or trafficking for some reason. My first thought was that Lyft sent me 2 drivers, and the cars being so similar was just a funny coincidence. I tell the guy my theory, and he just asks if I want to take his car instead. I say, yeah, I guess I will since you're here first. Then my actual driver pulls up. He sits stationary in the street and rolls down his window when I walk over. I think to myself, this is awkward, like seeing your ex on a date. And I toddle over to explain what's going on. I tell him I'm going to get in the other guy's car because he was here first. And my driver says I should probably go with whoever is on my phone. At this point, I'm just desperate to get into one of their cars, or I'm going to be late to work, so I figure that makes the most sense. I was just worried that one of them wouldn't get paid, or would I have to pay for both? I'm still thinking this is Lyft's fault. I turn around to go tell the original driver. I'm going to go with my real one on my phone, but before I do, he drives off. Weird. Guess he wanted to get out of here to catch his next ride. I get into my guy's car and settle in, and it wasn't until we start driving that he makes the point. So that was really weird, right? I hadn't thought of it like that. I metaphorically rub my chin for a moment and realize, holy shit, it kinda was. I ask my driver, has that ever happened to you before? He's been a Lyft driver for over 10 years, and he hasn't. My heart might as well have stopped as the realization dawned on me. Oh my God, That guy might have been pretending to be my driver on purpose. That sudden fear that I hadn't felt in years since before I came out and lived as an attractive young woman had punched me in gut all at once. And I realized that men go through this shit too. My palms were sweaty, and I try to make small talk to change the subject. We joke around a bit as I try to hide my increasing anxiety and paranoia. I tip him well, thank him, and he lets me know he's going to share what happened on a forum of fellow drivers to let them know what happened, so that made me feel a little better. First thing I do when I get into work is take one of my emergency anxiety meds with shaky hands, clock in, and book it to our outside break area. I call my dad, tell him what just happened. He tells me to make a report to Lyft, and I do. When I called them, they took it very seriously. I was still at this point trying to rationalize it as a server error, but no one had ever seen anything like that before. Not my experienced driver, no one I knew, not the Lyft representative, nothing. The woman I spoke to was really kind, and I appreciated her genuine concern. She told me she was going to send me an email and to send any physical proof I had of the event. I didn't have any. I spent about 15 minutes outside and didn't tell anyone aside my dad for a couple weeks. The whole thing was traumatic, especially after I had time alone to reflect and think about everything. A couple days later though, my dad got me a car though, so hey Dad. I analyzed every detail, my anxiety took full control and made me a total paranoid maniac. My dad somehow managed to give me every ride to work until he got me the car, which was a total surprise by the way. I did not know he was doing that. I think back on it still. The tinted windows, the timing, the similarity to the cars, the fact that no one has heard of this happening, the fact that if I had gotten in his car, we would have driven off and my actual driver would have just reported me as a no-show, and no one would have known for hours later that I was possibly missing because I was going to be at work. I did some research, and the general consensus with this was likely a trafficker who had access to Lyft servers and look for repeating customers like me, someone who is so used to hopping in and out of these cars that they probably have their guard down. In their eyes, I was a young, I like to think, conventionally attractive male. Could have been for homosexual trafficking or labor, although on both ends they would be very disappointed. For weeks after I carried pepper spray in my hand and a knife in my pocket and wallet, I also hid a couple in my car, which I realize isn't the safest if I get pulled over or anything. But so far I've been fine. Still look over my shoulder and avoid Lyft at all costs. I deleted the app for a while. Stay safe, read your license plates, and check your gut. Not all of us are so lucky to have our real driver pull up at the perfect time. He might have saved my life. Number 2. I witnessed a ritual in a cemetery. This happened about 5 years ago, back when I was going through hard times and was homeless. I used to live in Denver, Colorado, which is where this took place. There are several cemeteries in the Denver area, but there's one on the outskirts of Denver that's very large and very old. I think it may be the oldest one that's still being actively used. Before I became homeless, I didn't know much about this area. I had always gotten a creepy feeling around there, but didn't know why until I was on the streets. After that, I heard from many different people that it's got lots of underground tunnels, and some homeless people live in these tunnels. But in the deeper tunnels, there is cult activity. These tunnels have secret entrances all over the area, and the homeless that live around this area avoid some of these spider holes, because people have been known to disappear near them, mostly women. This area has a river going through it alongside the graveyard. One side of the river has a darker feel than the other. It's eerie over there and smells like death. Anyways, one time, I was wandering the area with a few other acquaintances. Safety in numbers and all that. We had nowhere to go and decided to hang out in the abandoned part of the graveyard, the older side. It had just gotten dark and it was windy. It was also fall, so it was cold. We were huddled up against gravestones to block the wind. One of the people I was with knew the area better than me, and he had warned me to be very vigilant. I figured this was so we didn't attract the attention of security or police or fellow homeless, but I later found out why he was so anxious about the area. It was probably around 10 p.m. We had sort of all been just sitting in silence, trying to stay warm, hoping the night passed quickly when I heard my acquaintance, let's call him Jay, whisper, "Hey, heads up, keep quiet." I had already been quiet, but I immediately tensed up, assuming he spotted security or something. But as I looked around, I saw in the distance some small, flickering lights, appearing here and there all around the graveyard. It's like people had been spread all around the large graveyard and they were all holding lighters that they flicked on, which only then showed they were all over. After my eyes adjusted a bit, I recognized they seemed to be candles. I looked harder and could sort of see the outlines of people holding these candles. Jay whispered, "We gotta go." We clumsily started grabbing the few items we had around us. Jay came right up next to me and said, "Follow me, and don't look at them." I was thinking, WTF? Me and our other friend quickly started following Jay, moving at a quick walk straight to the break in the fence where we had come in. I was stupid enough to look behind me and saw the lights/figures continuing to appear all around us, and they were walking to the middle of the graveyard to stand in a circle. I passed by a few and saw out of the corner of my eye they were wearing black cloaks. I could feel the menacing presence and stares, like they were daring me to look at them, but I had an overwhelming feeling that if we left them alone, that they would leave us alone. One thing that haunted me afterwards was the way they seemed to move towards the middle. They moved quickly and smoothly, like they were gliding, a stereotype, I know, and just seemed to morph out of the darkness. My instincts were on high alert. I knew whoever they were pure evil. We got the hill out of there, and once we got to the fence, we full-on sprinted for a few blocks. Jay didn't explain much. He just said to avoid those people and don't look them in the eye or they could have power over you. I definitely had gotten that feeling from the encounter. I asked why they weren't scared of cops or security, and he said basically that they got away with stuff they did because the authorities didn't want to risk looking into it because they didn't want to be targeted. I don't know how true this is, but I do know what I saw and felt. I have had several scary experiences during my time in Denver, and some other stories about this area, so you guys let me know if you want more background or want to hear the other things I've experienced/heard about this area. Number 3. I think I saw a skinwalker. To start this off, me and my fiancée were planning a trip to Utah for about a month. It was kind of an impulsive decision, but she wanted to visit her dad's grave in Delta, Utah. We just returned back home to Colorado today. Looking back on the trip, nothing went right and so many weird things happened. On the way to the Airbnb we booked in Manti, we saw many angel numbers. She's very spiritual, I'm a little skeptical. But everything felt normal for the most part. One thing I noticed was how many deer signs I saw, but I hadn't seen a single deer at all. Once we got to the Airbnb, I personally started to feel weird. I know that town is very Mormon, and I've never had any problem with them. I think everyone has a right to their own beliefs, and I respect it. But the way the town felt around the temple was eerie, to say the least. While we were in the Airbnb, something felt off. She used her pendulum to try and talk to her dad, but a spirit wouldn't let her get through to anyone. This spirit was Mormon, and she told us to leave, and we weren't welcome. Just for context, we are both women and have many tattoos and piercings, and I am Native American. I felt a gut-sinking feeling at this point, and I asked her to ask if me reading a portion of the Mormon Bible would make the spirit more comfortable with us staying there. She said yes, and I read a small bit before we left to get dinner. We decided to get Denny's right outside Manti. When we walked in, the servers kind of just stared at us for a good few minutes until I stared back for a while. That's when they decided to come and give us a table. I had a weird vibe from the people there, but I didn't make a fuss because I'm sure we looked different, especially in a small town coming from Denver. Once we got our food, I almost immediately felt sick after eating. I took only 3 bites before feeling sick. I thought maybe it was because we had been on the road literally all day, but as soon as we got back to driving to the Airbnb, I threw up. We instantly chalked it up to car sickness until I had my fiancée try a piece of my food, and she began to feel sick almost immediately as well. Yet her food was perfectly fine, and we got almost the exact same meal. We decided at that point not to eat out anymore and to use the money for food on groceries. So we left once more. We went to the nearest Walmart, and that experience was mostly normal besides the stares and weird glances we got. As we drove up to the Airbnb, my stomach began to sink again. I swear I saw what looked like a human face inside a bush next to the garage door. I felt a cold sweat, but we decided to go inside and just try to relax. Once we were inside again, and then getting ready for bed, we saw bugs over and over again. Almost like the cottage was infested with spiders and earwigs. At that point, my fiancé and I decided we had enough of that town, and we booked a hotel room for that night. It was around 11 p.m.-ish when we left, maybe a little earlier. The hotel was about 40 minutes away. The drive was all right at first until it took us to a dirt road with nothing at all around us. At this point, my mom had called us worried about us being out late in a foreign state. We stayed on the phone to calm our nerves. As we drove, a series of events played out. First, a black cat ran right across the road in front of our car. I was more freaked out about this because of that old saying on top of everything else that had happened that night. As we drove, there were no streetlights or signs, and my phone kept losing service, so we relied on Apple Maps to get us there. A little ways in, I saw a huge cow sitting on the side of the road just laying there. There wasn't a single other cow around him, or any other animal for that matter. And looking back on it now, I didn't see its eyes. The car lights didn't reflect his eyes, and he was really close. Almost seconds after, on the other side of the same road, I saw a giant white figure that almost resembled a horse, but the legs were too skinny, and it had no head, and it moved almost like it glided. Come to find out, my fiancée saw what looked like a man walking to our car as soon as we got on the dirt road, and didn't say anything because she was scared. I didn't say anything about the figure I saw either, because I know speaking it out is a bad idea, especially at night, and I didn't want to scare my fiancé. Once we got to the hotel, the gut sinking was gone, and we felt better. But I had a horrific nightmare about my mom dying and crawling around the ceiling like something out The Grudge. And when I woke up, my fiancé blamed the road for my dream. I think she was mostly joking, but I'm starting to think she was right. Even as I'm trying to write this out, I'm having problems with my keyboard lagging or Reddit closing me out of it. I switched to my notes app to write this, but it makes it so much more eerie. This just happened a few days ago, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I wanted to share this because I want to know if anyone knows WTF happened that night, or if that town has something wrong with it, literally anything.